Hello and welcome to my channel, I Went to Lose Gaming. So for those of you that have seen some of my recent videos, you'll know that I've been totally on the Ganyu hype train. Well, let me just say that I think Xiao will be extremely good as well. So if the data mined info and leaks hold strong, then Xiao is looking to be extremely powerful, at least as a main DPS. As usual, I'll be using my damage maximizer web app over at iwenttolose.com to calculate the maximized damage for Ganyu and Xiao respectively. With a lot of artifact farming, you can reach 70 to 80% of the average damage numbers provided in this video. We'll have a couple iterations of these two characters, the first being at C0, level 90 with level 9 skills and with refinement 1 of their recommended weapons. Then we'll look at them at their max potential at Constellation 6 with their Mega Whale Refinement 5 weapons. I'll also provide a couple quick sections near the end on artifacts and weapons for Xiao. Keep in mind that all the current information in this video is not final, especially the frame data. Speaking of frames, each frame is 1/60th of a second, so 60 frames is 1 second and 30 frames is half a second. We will analyze Xiao's plunge slam damage, his plunge combo, his C6 plunge EEE, which I'll be calling the plunge E, and a couple other options as well. Xiao's plunge slam damage is only counting the plunge's shockwaves damage. Xiao's plunge combo will count his plunge through damage, the plunge's shockwave, and the first hit of his auto attack for animation cancelling purposes. We'll also take a quick look at Xiao's basic attacks, which I do believe have some potential, but his basic attacks won't be the focus of this video. For these comparisons, Xiao will have the 2-piece Viridescent Veneer and 2-piece Gladiators, with 7 stacks on his Primordial Jade Winged Spear. Ganyu will have 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set, as well as another Cryo teammate, and with the Amos bow. There are a ton of additional assumptions, and if you're curious about all these assumptions, feel free to ask me in the comments below. I do have to put this important disclaimer. This is all pre-release theory crafting. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you can judge for yourself how accurate my predictions are. I do think that I've been in the correct ballpark with my previous pre-release theory crafting videos, but either way, please take this with a grain of salt. Anyway, these numbers focus on raw elemental damage output, and don't factor in any elemental reactions. Let's start with an analysis on their C0 DPS numbers. Upon initial inspection, it might look really bad for Ganyu. To summarize, it looks like for AoE damage, Xiao will do nearly twice the amount of DPS as Ganyu's Bloom. Against multiple monsters, Ganyu can only rely on her Bloom to hit them. Against single targets, Xiao's plunge combo looks pretty promising, but do keep in mind that the plunge combo is likely to be unreliable against many single targets. But these numbers are incredibly deceiving at first glance. Since Xiao needs to use his burst, we should also have Ganyu use her burst. Once their bursts are up, if we ignore the burst casting time, which is 1 second for Xiao and 2 seconds for Ganyu, then Ganyu does more DPS against a large group of mobs clustered together than Xiao does. This is because all of Ganyu's icicles will hit all of the monsters, whereas Xiao doesn't really gain much more plunge damage against enemies grouped together. Against just a couple of monsters, Xiao will start to pull ahead once there are 2 or less monsters grouped together. Also, if Xiao is able to hit all of his plunge combo hits on a single enemy, which is the plunge through hit, the plunge slam hit, and his first basic attack, then he's able to do better single target than Ganyu can even with her burst up. It's also important to note that Ganyu's burst doesn't pay off in terms of DPS against a single target until 5 seconds have passed, so do keep that in mind. How long it takes Ganyu's burst to pay off in comparison to its animation casting time depends on monster density and any opportunity costs you might avoided, like needing to dodge. Anyway, that point aside, Xiao and Ganyu will be situationally better than each other, with Xiao having an overall advantage, at least while his burst is up. However, Xiao without his burst up, and with an Anemo Goblet, is barely even a character. He has no real support capabilities, and his DPS output will be around Qiqi levels of DPS while his burst is down. So now let's take a quick look at both of these characters at C6, and with their Refinement 5 weapons. The reason why I include this segment is because a lot of players will have these characters, or will be working on these characters in the long run, towards their maximum potentials. The first interesting takeaway here is that Xiao's plunge EE combo practically doubles his DPS compared to just the plunge slams damage alone. Xiao is also able to do a plunge EEEEEE combo, I think that was 6 E's, as well. By saving his 3 charges and using the 3 free E's from his C6 proc, Xiao is able to chain together 6 E's in a row in certain scenarios, which is just pretty silly in my opinion. Another interesting to note is that Ganyu's C6 combo will do a bit more DPS than anything Xiao can output, but it's not nearly as spammable as long as there are 2 or more enemies. Now, I'm not going to go over all this data, but here's some key takeaways. For AoE damage, Xiao's C6 roughly doubles his AoE damage output compared to not C6 Xiao. Against single targets, Xiao should still try to utilize his plunge combo, because he's unable to utilize his plunge combo. Unlike at C0 though, where Ganyu can pull ahead against 5 monsters clumped up, Ganyu without her C6 combo will output notably less damage, even with 5 targets clumped up with her burst hitting all of them consecutively. And this is because Xiao will be able to do his plunge combo, which is looking to be pretty busted. Again, C6 Xiao without burst will still output around Qiqi levels of DPS with his basic attacks, so do keep that in mind. Another thing that's really important to note about these 2 characters is that you don't really have any cheap ways to amplify Xiao's damage output more than you can amplify Ganyu's damage output. Take Bennett for example. Although he provides both characters with his damage buff, he also provides Melt for Ganyu. It's not until you have maybe Constellation 4 Jean, Constellation 2 or 6 Venti, and Constellation 4 Albedo do you have characters that arguably provide Xiao a larger boost in damage compared to what they can provide for Ganyu. On top of this, Xiao loses his burst when he switches out, so he's basically stuck on the field until you absolutely need to switch out. Ganyu is very flexible in this regard and can just switch in, do her thing, and switch out without really losing anything. Also, I did completely ignore swirl damage, and against a large group of clustered enemies, there's a good chance that swirl can notably increase Xiao's damage, but for this analysis, I didn't include that. So ultimately, I think both characters are going to be extremely good. Like everything in this game, both these characters will have situations where they will do better than the other. I did want to emphasize a few of Xiao's weaknesses a bit more, because despite having those really large DPS numbers, it's important to know what you're getting yourself into. Xiao is looking to be an extremely mediocre character without his burst, only having his E as an option to do reasonable damage. Xiao is also likely to have some energy regeneration problems, especially in areas with low monster density. And a huge problem for Xiao is that he can't swap out without losing his burst. And right now we also don't know how Xiao does against shields. So because shield monsters often spawn after non-shield monsters, you might be forced to swap out of Xiao if he can't deal with those shields. Finally, Xiao also loses HP during his burst, and he can get knocked out of the air when he jumps. Due to all these problems, Xiao may struggle to practically apply his theoretical DPS, but hopefully you can use your supports to somehow enable him to output his extremely high theoretical DPS. And I believe he makes up for these weaknesses by having well over Ganyu levels of DPS, as long as he's able to practically apply them. And this brings me to my next topic, power creep. If you're worried about Xiao power creeping Ganyu, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Both characters will be situationally better than the other. Ganyu without her burst is still a good character, unlike Xiao. However, if you're worried about power creep compared to the rest of the cast, then your worries are probably extremely valid. The rest of the cast is just going to fall further and further behind. Whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, the current content in this game is balanced with main DPS Traveler in mind, so the content will either be potentially too easy or too hard, depending on your situation. I just wanted to quickly point out that the power gap is quickly increasing with each new character that's released, and it will only get worse from here out unless MiHoYo starts buffing older characters. We all thought Ganyu was broken, and let me just tell you, Xiao is going to do a lot more damage than Ganyu in certain scenarios, which is pretty crazy to think about. Another thing that's super important to know is that Xiao, upon release, may not be as strong as indicated by these numbers, simply due to skill materials. Since Ganyu and Xiao both use Child's plug things, not being able to level Xiao's skills will reduce his damage output upon release by a lot. A Xiao with a level 10 basic attack will do 36% more plunge damage than a Xiao with a level 6 basic attack. Since Xiao also needs to level up all 3 of his skills to be played optimally, it's going to be a long time before Xiao really meets his full damage potential. At the current rate of boss skill materials dropping, It'll probably take, I don't know, like 73 years to get enough boss materials to max Xiao out. I'll quickly touch upon artifacts for Xiao. Right now, you should just run the Viridescent Veneer 2-piece and Gladiator's 2-piece if you're going for the plunge damage build. Maybe Xiao's normal attack and charged attack will be good, but I simply didn't have the time or the data to fully analyze that. It's worth noting that as of today, Xiao does not have a great 4-piece artifact set to use, so he's likely to get even stronger in the future when an appropriate set is released for him. For weapons, be sure to check out my last video where I break down his weapon choices in more detail, but here's a chart if you don't want to hear the full explanation. To summarize, I think Xiao will do a boatload of damage. While his burst is up, he's a high reward and high commitment character that has an extremely high and consistent damage ceiling. But this makes sense since he's an Anemo DPS without the ability to put out massive melt and vaporize numbers. Let me know what you guys think about Xiao in the comments below. I know these pre-release videos are completely full of conjecture, so please take everything in this video with a grain of salt. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, etc. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.